Wait, so if robots take our jobs, we just get paid for existing? Is that real?
It's called universal basic income. Some say it's the future, others say it's a disaster waiting to happen.
I heard that some countries are actually testing it out. Like, Finland tried it a few years ago.
Exactly. They gave a basic income to a group of unemployed people, but the results were mixed.
What do you mean by mixed?
Well, some participants reported feeling happier and less stressed, while others didn't find jobs or improve their situation significantly.
Interesting. I also read that UBI could help reduce poverty rates. Is that true?
Yes, proponents argue that it could provide a safety net for everyone, ensuring basic needs are met, especially in times of economic change.
But what about the critics? I've heard some say it could discourage people from working.
That's a common argument. Critics worry it might create dependency on government support and reduce the incentive to work.
So, it seems like there are valid points on both sides.
Definitely. It's a complex issue that needs careful consideration, especially as automation continues to rise. Here's a video that dives deeper into this debate.
Universal basic income. Free money for everyone. No work required. Sounds amazing, right? Like winning the lottery, except everyone wins. But here's the twist. Someone's gotta foot the bill. Some say UBI is the future, a safety net for when the robots steal our jobs. Others say it's an economic disaster waiting to happen, like giving everyone a participation trophy, but making the trophy out of taxpayer dollars. The argument goes like this. Automation is wiping out jobs. Truck drivers, self-driving semis. Cashiers, self-checkout. Writers, well, let's just say I'm keeping an eye on AI-generated fan fiction. At first glance, it sounds like the ultimate life upgrade. No more stressing over rent. No more waking up to an alarm clock that hates you. Just free money, guaranteed. But if history has taught us anything, it's that nothing is ever really free, except opinions on Twitter. And trust me, those come at a price. And then there's the big question. If people don't have to work, will they? Will UBI give everyone the freedom to chase their dreams, start businesses, and finally learn French? Or will it turn society into a giant, government-sponsored Netflix binge? Some experts say UBI could end poverty forever. Others say it'll trigger inflation faster than a viral TikTok trend. So which is it? A utopia where no one has to work? Or an economic ticking time bomb? Buckle up, because we're about to break it all down. Alright, before we decide whether UBI is the best thing since Wi-Fi or an economic horror story, let's break down what it actually is. Universal basic income is exactly what it sounds like. A guaranteed amount of money given to every citizen. No strings attached. You don't have to work for it, apply for it, or prove you need it. It just shows up, like your paycheck, except without the soul-crushing meetings and passive-aggressive emails. Supporters say it's the ultimate safety net. A monthly cushion that ensures everyone, no matter their job status, has enough to cover basic needs. In theory, it eliminates poverty, reduces stress, and gives people the freedom to pursue their passions, like writing that novel they've been talking about for the last 5 years. But there's a catch. UBI isn't just money falling from the sky. It has to come from somewhere. And depending on who you ask, that somewhere is either a genius redistribution of wealth or a one-way ticket to higher taxes and economic chaos. And let's be honest, people react very differently to the idea of free money. Some see it as liberation, a way to escape the paycheck-to-paycheck grind. Others hear free money and immediately assume society is about to turn into a chaotic, lawless wasteland. You know, like Black Friday at Walmart. So, does UBI actually work? Has anyone tried it before? And what happens when you start handing out money to millions of people? Well, buckle up, because next, we're diving into the real-world experiments that have put UBI to the test. Alright, let's start with the optimistic take. The people who say universal basic income is the economic version of a superhero, swooping in to save the day. And their biggest argument, UBI could end poverty. For good. The logic is pretty simple. Give people a guaranteed amount of money, and suddenly, nobody has to choose between paying rent and eating dinner. No more struggling to make ends meet. No more people one bad month away from financial disaster. It's like putting a safety net under the entire economy, except some argue that net has a massive hole in the middle. And before you say, this is just some pie-in-the-sky fantasy, let's talk numbers. In 2022, the US government spent over $1.2 trillion on welfare, food stamps, and unemployment benefits. What if, instead of juggling a dozen different programs, we just gave people cash directly? No bureaucracy, no middlemen, just money in people's pockets. And it's not just a theory. Small-scale UBI trials have already been tested. In Finland, they gave unemployed people a monthly stipend, no questions asked. The result? People were happier, healthier, and less stressed. And get this. Some even found jobs faster than those on traditional unemployment benefits. Turns out, when you're not drowning in financial anxiety, you actually have time to figure things out. But let's be real. This is the best-case scenario. In theory, UBI makes sure nobody falls through the cracks. In reality, well, that's where things get messy. And not everyone thinks free money is a good idea. Alright, let's talk about the other big reason people think UBI is inevitable: automation. Because while it might sound like science fiction, the reality is that robots are coming for a lot of jobs. And not just factory work or truck driving. AI is creeping into everything from customer service to coding to, well, even writing YouTube scripts. No, seriously, I'm watching my back. Big names in tech, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, even former presidential candidate Andrew Yang, have all warned that mass automation will wipe out millions of jobs. Their solution? Universal basic income. Give people a financial cushion so they don't suffer while the economy transitions. The argument makes sense. In past industrial revolutions, new jobs always replaced the old ones. But what if this time is different? What if technology is advancing so fast that there aren't enough new jobs to replace the lost ones? What if instead of evolving into new careers, a big chunk of the workforce just isn't needed anymore? This is why UBI is often sold as future-proofing the economy. Instead of scrambling to reinvent jobs, why not just admit that fewer jobs exist and pay people directly? It sounds logical. But here's the problem. When you start handing out free money, things don't always go as planned. Because while some say UBI is a solution to automation, others argue it's just a band-aid on a bullet wound. And the biggest question remains, who's actually going to pay for all this? But before we talk about the criticism of UBI, let's take a look at who is the biggest proponent of UBI and why. If there's one person who's practically become the face of UBI, it's Andrew Yang. The former presidential candidate built his entire campaign around one big idea, the freedom dividend, a plan to give every American adult $1,000 per month, no strings attached. Yang's core argument? The robots are coming. He sees automation not as a future threat, but as something already happening. Self-checkout machines, AI-driven logistics, automated warehouses, jobs are disappearing faster than most politicians are willing to admit. And instead of pretending that everything will work itself out, Yang argues we need to get ahead of the problem. His counter to the UBI makes people lazy argument? look at how people actually spend their money. In pilot programs, participants overwhelmingly spent their UBI on rent, groceries, medical expenses, basic survival. And if you think people will just quit working, his counter is simple. Most people want to work, but instead of being stuck in jobs they hate just to survive, UBI lets them pursue jobs that actually fit their skills, start businesses, or go back to school. And what about the cost? Yang's plan would fund UBI with a value-added tax, basically a small tax on goods and services, like what most European countries already have. His argument? Companies like Amazon and Google generate billions in revenue, but pay shockingly little in taxes. A value-added tax ensures that when automation makes businesses more efficient, the economic benefits are shared with the people, not just the CEOs. Yang's version of UBI isn't just about economic security. It's about making sure the wealth created by automation doesn't just pile up in Silicon Valley bank accounts. It's a bold vision, but not everyone's buying it. In fact, some of the strongest voices in economics think UBI is nothing short of financial suicide. Next up, the people who are fighting hardest against UBI and why they think it's a disaster in the making. Now that we've seen the rosy vision of UBI, let's turn the coin. Critics argue that universal basic income isn't a magic bullet. It might even be the economic equivalent of overloading your credit card without a plan to pay it off. The first major concern? Cost. UBI is like throwing a lavish party for everyone in the country, but someone's got to pick up the tab. And if the numbers don't add up, that bill could come back with some serious interest. Even modest UBI proposals would cost trillions annually. And, while Yang suggests a VAT, critics argue that raising enough money to fund UBI would require massive tax hikes, not just on corporations, but on everyday consumers. You think inflation is bad now? Imagine when every product gets a new tax slapped on top. Some economists warn that UBI could trigger runaway inflation. More cash in everyone's pocket might initially boost spending, but if the supply of goods doesn't keep up, prices could soar. That means today's free money might be tomorrow's expensive coffee. Then there's the fear that handing out money for free might dampen people's incentive to work. Imagine if the prospect of free cash led to widespread Netflix binging instead of creative hustling. Skeptics worry that without the motivation to earn, society could gradually lose its drive to innovate and contribute. Critics also point to potential unintended consequences, like an over-reliance on government spending. What happens when the economy shifts so heavily towards this model and unexpected downturns occur? The safety net could become a trap, leaving future generations with hefty tax bills and a bloated public sector. It's a classic debate. Is UBI a visionary solution to modern economic challenges, or a risky gamble that might cost us dearly in the long run? As we dig deeper, we'll explore real-world experiments and see just how these theories have played out in practice. Alright, theories are fun, but has UBI actually worked anywhere? Let's take a look at the real-world test runs. Because believe it or not, governments and organizations have already handed out free money to see what happens. Spoiler: it wasn't all Ferraris and champagne. One of the most famous experiments happened in Finland. In 2017, they gave 2,000 unemployed people a monthly stipend. No conditions, no requirements. The results? Participants reported higher life satisfaction, lower stress, and, surprisingly, many of them kept working. Turns out, people don't immediately quit life when you give them a little breathing room. Then there's Canada. The province of Ontario launched a UBI trial in 2017, but, classic government move, it was cancelled early due to budget concerns. Translation: they realized handing out free money is expensive. Even the US has dipped its toes in. Cities like Stockton, California, have tested small-scale basic income programs. And guess what? People mostly spent the money on essentials. Rent, groceries, bills. Not vacations, not NFTs, just survival. So what do these trials tell us? Well, they show that UBI can improve quality of life. People feel more secure, less stressed, and in some cases, more motivated to work. But here's the catch. These were small-scale experiments. Running a UBI program for a few thousand people is one thing. Doing it for an entire country, that's a whole different beast. Which brings us to the final question. Can UBI actually work at a national level? Or is it just an idealistic dream that collapses under the weight of reality? All right, we've seen the arguments for and against UBI, plus some real-world test runs. But here's the trillion-dollar question. Could this actually work at a national level? Or does it fall apart the second you start doing the math? Let's talk cost. Most proposals suggest giving every adult around $1,000 a month. Sounds reasonable until you multiply it by an entire country. In the US, that would cost $3 to $4 trillion a year. That's nearly half the entire federal budget. Where does all that money come from? Supporters say higher taxes, particularly a value-added tax, VAT, could fund it. Basically, companies like Amazon and Google would finally pay their fair share. But critics argue that either taxes would have to be much higher than advertised, or we'd be printing money faster than a limited edition NFT drop. And then there's inflation. If you flood the economy with cash, but the supply of goods stays the same, won't prices just rise? UBI advocates say automation will drive costs down, but opponents counter that businesses might just keep those savings instead of lowering prices. And let's not forget the biggest obstacle, politics. Even if economists could agree on a workable UBI plan, spoiler, they don't, getting it passed? Good luck. Some fear it's socialism, others say it doesn't go far enough. Changing an entire economic system isn't as simple as signing a check. So where does that leave us? UBI could be feasible under very specific conditions, like major economic growth, huge tax reforms, or completely restructuring government spending. But today, it's still mostly a thought experiment. So if UBI is this hard to implement, what else can we do? Are there better ways to help people in a world of automation? Let's look at the alternatives. All right, let's say you're not convinced that handing out cash to everyone is the best solution. You're not alone. Even some people who like the idea of a stronger safety net think UBI is the wrong way to do it. So what are the alternatives? One of the most famous alternatives comes from economist Milton Friedman. Yes, the same guy free market fans love to quote. Instead of giving everyone free money, his idea was the negative income tax. Basically, if you make below a certain income level, the government pays you instead of taxing you. The logic? It helps the people who actually need assistance, but still encourages work. As you earn more, the payments phase out gradually, so there's still an incentive to keep working. It's like UBI, but with built-in guardrails to prevent people from just checking out of the workforce entirely. Another approach? Instead of throwing out the entire welfare system and replacing it with UBI, why not just improve what we already have? Programs like food stamps, housing assistance, and earned income tax credits already exist to help people in need. If the goal is to reduce poverty, some argue we should just fund these programs better and make them easier to access. Critics of UBI say that a one-size-fits-all cash handout doesn't make sense. Giving Jeff Bezos and a single mother living paycheck to paycheck the same $1,000 check each month. Probably not the most efficient way to allocate resources. Then there's the universal job guarantee. Instead of handing out free money, the government guarantees a job to anyone who wants one. Public works, infrastructure projects, environmental initiatives. You work, you get paid. Simple. This model keeps people engaged in the workforce, ensures everyone has an income, and contributes to society. It also sidesteps the "people will stop working" argument against UBI. The downside? Some argue it could be inefficient and lead to a bloated government workforce. Basically, a modern-day version of the New Deal, but with way more paperwork. Another alternative? Instead of just giving people money, invest in programs that help them transition to new careers. As automation replaces jobs, governments could fund large-scale retraining programs, coding boot camps, skilled trades, AI-resistant careers. You know, the stuff robots probably won't take over in the next decade. This approach assumes that work will still exist in the future, just in different forms. The goal isn't to remove jobs, it's to help people adapt to the changing economy, instead of replacing their income entirely. Of course, some argue that the best solution isn't an all-or-nothing approach. Instead of full-scale UBI, why not a partial UBI? Smaller payments targeted at those most affected by automation or low-income workers? A hybrid approach could give people financial security without breaking the bank. So, is UBI really the only solution to poverty and automation? Not necessarily. There are other ways to support workers, reduce inequality, and prepare for an automated future, ones that don't involve handing out cash to everyone. But then again, are these alternatives enough? Or will UBI become inevitable as automation speeds up? So, after all this, where do we land? Is universal basic income the revolutionary solution to poverty and automation? Or is it just an economic pipe dream? On one hand, UBI could provide a safety net in an increasingly unstable job market. As automation replaces traditional work, UBI could prevent millions from falling into poverty. It could give people the freedom to pursue education, entrepreneurship, or even just a better quality of life. And let's be honest, if robots are doing most of the work, why shouldn't we all get a cut of the profits? On the other hand, the logistics are messy. Funding a nationwide UBI is insanely expensive, and the economic ripple effects, whether it's inflation, labor force changes, or taxation, are impossible to predict with certainty. Critics argue that instead of giving everyone free money, we should be focusing on targeted policies that actually help those in need without potentially wrecking the economy. At the end of the day, UBI is still an open question. Some believe it's inevitable as automation accelerates, while others say it's just another utopian idea that sounds great in TED Talks, but falls apart in the real world. But one thing's for sure, the debate isn't going away anytime soon, because whether we like it or not, technology is changing the economy. And if UBI isn't the answer, we better figure out what is, before the robots finish taking over. And if you're looking for free money that actually exists right now, no government debates required, check out all the sign-up bonuses available today. Banks are literally handing out hundreds of dollars just for opening an account. Don't miss out. Head over to moneysmylife.com and start earning now. What do you think? Is universal basic income the future, or is it a disaster waiting to happen? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out our other videos on the biggest economic shifts shaping our world.